The hotel lobby was alive with the soft buzz of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional laugh from people enjoying their evening. A grand chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting warm golden light over the polished marble floor. The piano in the corner looked elegant and inviting, a silent promise of music waiting to fill the room. Guests were scattered around, some sitting on plush chairs, others walking about with drinks in their hands, enjoying the comfortable atmosphere of the hotel. It was the kind of evening where everything felt normal and predictable. Then the old man arrived. No one noticed him at first. He moved slowly, taking measured steps, as if he didn't want to disturb anyone. His clothes were simple, worn, and a little dusty, nothing like the fine suits and elegant dresses of the other guests. He had a hat pulled low over his forehead, hiding part of his face, and a small bag slung over his shoulder. There was nothing in his appearance that would suggest he belonged in a place like this. In fact, most of the people in the lobby didn't give him a second glance at first. But curiosity slowly started to spread. Who was this quiet old man, and why did he move toward the piano? As he got closer, some guests started whispering to each other. "Look at him," one said quietly, trying not to be too obvious. "Does he really think he can play?" Another chuckled and shook their head. "He looks so old and fragile. I bet he'll sit there for 5 seconds and walk away." Laughter broke out softly at first, then a few louder chuckles followed. The old man didn't seem to notice. He walked straight to the piano and placed his hands lightly on the keys. He didn't rush or hesitate. He simply sat down, adjusted his posture, and waited, calm and composed. The people around him leaned in slightly, curious and skeptical at the same time. Some of the hotel staff glanced over, raising an eyebrow. The pianist who usually played that evening was on a break, but he stopped mid-conversation to watch. He had seen plenty of visitors try to sit at the piano before, most of them fumbling through a few awkward notes. He expected the same from this man. The crowd around the piano grew slowly. People were drawn by a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Whispers and quiet laughter continued, some people even filming with their phones, ready to capture what they thought would be a funny moment. The old man didn't speak. He simply placed his fingers on the keys, taking a deep, quiet breath. His eyes were closed for a moment, as if he was listening to something only he could hear. The laughter started to die down slightly as people waited. There was a strange stillness in the air, a sense that something unexpected might happen. Some guests moved closer, their curiosity overcoming their initial amusement. They wanted to see what would happen next. A few even dared to think that maybe, just maybe, he could play. But most still doubted it, smiling knowingly at each other, sharing a secret joke at his expense. Minutes passed slowly. The old man shifted slightly in his seat, and then pressed a single key. The sound that came out was soft, almost delicate, but perfectly clear. It wasn't just a random note. It was deliberate, precise. The room fell silent instantly. The laughter had no place here anymore. Guests stopped mid-conversation, holding their drinks, staring at him. Even the staff looked surprised. Something in the sound demanded attention. It was the first note of a song that no one expected. It was simple, but it carried a strange weight, a beauty that seemed to touch the room itself. He continued, gently at first, each note carefully chosen. The melody was unfamiliar to most of the listeners, but it had a rhythm and flow that felt natural and comforting. People began to forget about laughing. Some leaned forward, resting their elbows on their knees, watching intently. The old man's fingers moved across the keys with confidence and grace. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only the music that flowed from him like it had been a part of him all his life. The old man wasn't just playing the piano. He was telling a story with every note. As he played, the crowd began to notice details they hadn't expected. His hands moved smoothly, without effort, dancing across the keys. His back was straight, posture perfect, as if every movement had been practiced for years. There was a quiet intensity in his face, a focus that made the listeners forget everything else around them. The room seemed to shrink, the chatter of the guests disappearing, leaving only the sound of the piano. People who had been ready to mock him now found themselves holding their breath, waiting for the next note. Even the skeptical pianist in the corner felt a twinge of awe. Some of the guests exchanged glances, a mixture of surprise and disbelief on their faces. They had come to the lobby expecting a normal evening, a bit of light entertainment, and maybe a funny story to share later. Instead, they were witnessing something extraordinary. The old man's music was not just skillful, it had depth, emotion, and power. It reached into their hearts, stirring memories and feelings they didn't know were there. Even those who didn't usually care much for piano music felt a pull, a desire to listen closer and not miss a single note. The old man's playing seemed to tell a story without words. There were moments of quiet reflection, soft passages that made listeners lean in and hold their breath. Then, without warning, a note would rise, bold and strong, filling the room with energy and emotion. People's emotions swayed with the music, from calmness to excitement, from sorrow to joy. The melody was alive, and it was as if the old man was sharing his entire life with everyone present, not through speech, but through the language of the piano. As the song progressed, the audience's initial amusement had completely disappeared. There was no room for laughter anymore. The old man's music had commanded respect and attention. People were mesmerized, some with tears forming in their eyes, others smiling softly at the beauty of what they were hearing. Even the staff, who had seen many performers come and go, stood quietly, unable to believe the skill and emotion emanating from the old man at the piano. Phones were still raised, recording, but now it was with reverence, not ridicule. The old man didn't rush. Each note had its place. He paused sometimes, letting the silence speak for a moment, before continuing with another series of notes that seemed to float effortlessly in the air. It was clear that he wasn't just playing a song. He was expressing a lifetime of experiences, hardships, and joys. Every person in the room felt the power of his music, and those who had doubted him earlier now felt a mixture of humility and awe. For the first time in that evening, the laughter had completely vanished. The hotel lobby, once full of casual chatter and amusement, had transformed into a space of deep focus and wonder. The old man's presence, simple and unassuming, had turned the ordinary setting into something extraordinary. People could feel that this was a rare moment, one they would remember long after they left the hotel. They had come for a normal evening, but they were witnessing a legend in action, a man who could turn a few black and white keys into a world of emotion and beauty. By the time he finished the first part of his performance, the audience sat in stunned silence, absorbing what they had just heard. No one moved immediately, no one spoke. Even the gentle hum of the hotel's evening atmosphere seemed to pause. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, a few people began to clap, softly at first, then louder as the realization sank in. The old man simply nodded, not proud or boastful, but acknowledging the appreciation. He didn't look for attention. He just let the music speak for him. And in that moment, every single person in the lobby understood that the laughter at the beginning had been misplaced. They had underestimated him completely, and now they could only watch in amazement as this unassuming old man revealed the power of a true artist. After the first notes of the old man's playing faded into silence, the hotel lobby remained quiet, almost as if the air itself was holding its breath. The guests who had been laughing earlier were no longer joking. Their faces showed surprise, admiration, and a little guilt for underestimating him. The old man didn't rush to fill the silence. He simply sat with his hands resting lightly on the keys, looking calm and peaceful. It was a strange contrast. The way he seemed so ordinary in appearance, yet so extraordinary in talent. People slowly started to murmur among themselves, sharing quiet comments that reflected their amazement. "Did you hear that?" One guest whispered to another, their eyes wide. "I thought it would be funny, but he's incredible." Another nodded, shaking their head. "I can't believe we laughed at him. I feel so bad now." A few people who had been recording the moment on their phones lowered them, realizing they were witnessing something far more important than just a brief amusement. The music had already touched them in a way that no joke ever could. The old man finally pressed another key, soft at first, letting the note linger in the air. Then, with a subtle, almost invisible shift of his fingers, he began a new melody. It was different from the first one, slightly faster, playful, yet still full of emotion. His hands moved gracefully, gliding across the keys with an ease that seemed natural and effortless. The room, once filled with laughter and casual chatter, was now entirely focused on him. Every eye followed his fingers, every ear caught each note. People who hadn't paid attention to music before found themselves drawn in, captivated by the sound. As he played, small details about his technique became noticeable. The way his fingers pressed the keys, how his hands curved, how he seemed to anticipate the next note before it arrived. It was as if the piano was an extension of his body. He didn't just play the notes. He shaped them, added life and emotion, making each chord tell a story. The audience realized that this was no ordinary musician. This was a man who had spent decades learning, practicing, and perfecting his art. The whispers in the room grew into quiet conversations, not mocking, but filled with wonder. "He must have played in big concerts," one person suggested. "I think he's a professional," another said, eyes glued to his hands. The old man remained silent, focused on the piano. He didn't respond to the speculation. There was no need. The music itself was his answer. Each note, each pause, each rise and fall carried his story, his experience, and his emotions. Some of the guests began to imagine the life this old man might have lived. Perhaps he had once played in grand theaters to crowds that adored him. Perhaps he had endured hardships, yet never stopped practicing, always perfecting his craft. The thought made the music even more powerful. It wasn't just beautiful, it was full of life, full of history, and full of emotion. Every chord, every melody told a piece of a life that most of the people in the lobby could only imagine. The old man's expression was calm, but his eyes were focused and sharp. He seemed to notice every sound around him, every subtle movement of the keys. The music flowed naturally, sometimes slow and melancholic, sometimes lively and joyful. It was a balance of emotions, reflecting life itself. People felt drawn into the story he was telling without words. Some felt their hearts tighten with sadness. Others felt uplifted and joyful. The music spoke directly to them, in a language they all understood. The room itself seemed to change. The warm light of the chandelier above reflected off the polished floor, adding a golden glow to the scene. The guests' shadows stretched across the marble, moving gently with the sway of their bodies as they listened. The piano, once just a piece of furniture in the corner, now seemed alive, responding to the touch of the old man's hands. It wasn't just a performance. It was an experience, a shared moment of connection between the musician and everyone present. A few children in the lobby, who had been playing quietly, stopped and sat on the floor, watching. They were mesmerized, eyes wide with wonder. They didn't fully understand the technique or theory, but they felt the beauty and emotion of the music. Some of the older guests noticed them and smiled, realizing that music had a power that crossed age, experience, and expectation. It could captivate anyone, no matter how young or old. As the old man continued, the audience became completely silent, hanging on every note. Some people leaned forward in their chairs. Others rested their hands on the arms of the furniture, holding their breath. The melody rose and fell like waves, gentle at times, strong at others. It was as if he was speaking to each person individually, telling stories that resonated with their own experiences. Each note carried weight and meaning, and the room was filled with a shared sense of awe and admiration. The whispers of disbelief from earlier had disappeared entirely. People no longer laughed or doubted him. Now, they were witnessing a rare gift, something that would stay with them for a lifetime. Even the hotel staff, who were used to welcoming guests from all walks of life, felt a deep respect for this old man. He had transformed the ordinary evening into an extraordinary memory. The simple act of playing the piano had become a moment of magic, a moment that connected everyone in the room. As the performance progressed, some guests began to notice subtle movements in the old man's hands that revealed his mastery. He didn't need to look at the keys to know where to place his fingers. He anticipated each note, each chord, as if the piano itself was an extension of his mind. The dynamics of the music, the soft whispers, the strong, bold statements, were perfectly balanced. It was clear to everyone watching that he had dedicated a lifetime to this craft. Every detail, every motion, spoke of countless hours of practice, discipline, and passion. The atmosphere was almost sacred. The sound of the piano filled every corner of the lobby, creating a cocoon of emotion. People who had been strangers moments before felt connected through the music. Some closed their eyes, letting the notes wash over them. Others watched every movement of his hands, trying to understand how one person could create such beauty. The old man played not for recognition or fame, but because it was part of him. The music was a gift, and he shared it freely, touching everyone in the room. Time seemed to stretch. Guests lost track of the minutes, focused entirely on the performance. The old man didn't rush or seek attention. He let the music guide him. Each phrase, each chord, flowed naturally from his experience and emotion. The story he was telling through music was becoming clearer with every note. People could feel his life's journey, his struggles, his joys, his quiet moments of reflection. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a storyteller, and the old man was its voice. By the time he paused briefly to rest his hands, the lobby was completely silent, every ear attuned to the slightest sound. The moment was powerful, filled with anticipation and wonder. People leaned forward slightly, not wanting to miss the next note. Even those who were usually skeptical of live performances felt compelled to stay and listen. They understood that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a rare and unforgettable experience. The old man's pause was gentle, almost as if he was taking a deep breath before continuing. The silence itself spoke volumes. It was a pause that allowed the audience to reflect on what they had just heard, to feel the emotion of the first part of the melody. Some guests looked at each other, sharing silent nods and expressions of awe. There was a mutual understanding that this was no ordinary evening. They were witnessing a moment that would stay in their memories forever. When he began to play again, the music changed slightly, introducing a new rhythm and tempo. The melody became more dynamic, moving from soft, reflective passages to stronger, more energetic ones. The transition was seamless, showcasing the old man's control and mastery. The audience felt every emotion as if it was their own. Some felt a rush of joy, others a gentle sadness, and many felt both at once. It was a journey through life, expressed entirely through the language of music. Guests who had been recording on their phones now lowered them, realizing that no device could truly capture the essence of what was happening. They wanted to experience it fully, to feel it directly. Some reached out to touch the edges of their seats, as if grounding themselves in the reality of the moment. The old man's performance was no longer just entertainment. It was a shared human experience, a reminder of the beauty, depth, and power of art. Even the children, who had been sitting quietly at first, began to smile and sway gently to the rhythm. They didn't need to understand the theory or history behind the music. They simply felt it. The magic of the old man's playing transcended age, background, and experience. It reminded everyone in the lobby that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most unexpected people. The old man's music continued to fill the room, each note carefully chosen, each chord perfectly placed. The audience was fully engaged, captivated by every movement, every sound. No one laughed, no one whispered, no one moved away. They were all present, fully immersed in the performance. The old man had transformed the hotel lobby into a place of wonder, connecting people through the universal language of music. And in that moment, everyone understood that they had been witnesses to something truly remarkable. As the old man's hands continued to move across the keys, a deeper sense of awe settled over the hotel lobby. The room, once filled with casual chatter and laughter, had transformed into a place where time seemed to slow down. Each note he played carried a weight and beauty that captured the attention of every guest. The old man's movements were precise, yet natural, as if he and the piano were speaking to each other in a language only they understood. There was no rush in his playing. Every moment was deliberate, every pause meaningful. Guests who had been whispering earlier now sat in complete silence. Some had their hands resting on their laps, fingers fidgeting nervously as they tried to process the performance. Others leaned forward slightly in their seats, eyes fixed on the old man, watching how his fingers glided over the keys with effortless skill. The music itself seemed to tell stories of distant places, memories of long-ago times, and emotions that words could not capture. It was as though he was sharing pieces of his life with everyone listening, and the audience could feel it deep in their hearts. The old man's face remained calm and serene, yet there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. He seemed aware of every note, every sound in the room, and yet he was entirely focused on the music. The melody rose and fell like the ebb and flow of waves, carrying emotions that shifted seamlessly from gentle sadness to joyful celebration. People felt themselves drawn into the music, some closing their eyes to experience it more fully. It was impossible to look away or be distracted. The piano had captured their entire attention. As the performance continued, the crowd began to notice small details that revealed the depth of his mastery. The subtle shifts in his tempo, the slight change in volume, and the delicate pauses between notes all added layers of emotion. Each hand moved independently, yet harmoniously, creating a sound that was rich, complex, and alive. The old man's skill was evident, but it was more than just technique. It was his ability to communicate and connect with the audience through music that made him extraordinary. People began to imagine the life this old man might have led. Perhaps he had once played in grand concert halls, his music echoing through theaters filled with thousands. Perhaps he had traveled far and faced challenges that tested his dedication and love for the piano. These thoughts made the performance even more powerful. It was not just the music itself that captivated them, it was the life and experience that had shaped the man who created it. Each note seemed to carry a story, a memory, or an emotion, and the audience felt privileged to witness it. A few children, who had been sitting quietly at the back of the lobby, were completely mesmerized. Their eyes were wide, and they barely breathed as they watched the old man play. They didn't understand the theory behind what he was doing, but they could feel the emotion, the beauty, and the passion. They leaned closer, trying to take in every detail, even the movement of his fingers. Their innocence and wonder reflected the pure power of music. It could touch anyone, regardless of age or experience. The atmosphere in the lobby was almost magical. The warm light from the chandelier reflected off the polished floor, creating soft glows that danced around the room. The grand piano seemed to come alive under his hands, each key responding to his touch with a voice that could speak to every heart present. Guests felt connected, not just to the music but to each other, sharing in a moment that was both intimate and communal. It was a rare experience that transcended ordinary entertainment and became something deeply human. As the old man played, subtle variations in the melody suggested stories of joy and sorrow, hope and reflection. People felt the rise and fall of his emotions, carried through the sound of the piano. Some felt a sense of longing, others a comforting sense of peace. It was as though the music had the power to touch memories buried deep within them, to evoke feelings they had not experienced in years. The old man's performance was not just heard, it was felt deeply and personally. The whispers of disbelief from earlier had completely disappeared. Now, guests were speaking in soft, reverent tones, commenting on the beauty and skill they were witnessing. "He's incredible," one whispered. "I've never heard anything like this before," said another. Even the hotel staff, who had seen many performers over the years, stood quietly, completely absorbed. The old man's presence had transformed the lobby, and everyone was aware of the rare and special moment unfolding before them. The melody shifted again, moving into a more lively section. His fingers flew across the keys with ease, producing a sound that was both powerful and delicate. The rhythm picked up, and the audience could feel the energy in the room change. Some tapped their feet subtly, others nodded their heads, and some children began to sway gently. The old man's music had the ability to move people physically and emotionally, creating a sense of shared experience and joy. The audience began to notice how effortlessly he transitioned between different styles and emotions. One moment the music was soft and reflective, the next it became strong and passionate. The changes were subtle, yet each shift carried meaning and depth. People felt the story unfolding, understanding without words what the old man was communicating. The complexity of the music did not overwhelm them. Instead, it invited them in, guiding them through a journey of emotion and connection. Some guests began to imagine the countless hours of practice and dedication that must have gone into developing such mastery. They thought about the years of commitment, the sacrifices, and the love for music that had brought him to this moment. It was clear that every note was earned through experience and passion. The old man played not for recognition or applause, but because it was a part of who he was. The music flowed naturally, an expression of a lifetime spent with the piano. The room seemed to shrink around the music, creating an intimate space even though there were many people present. Guests leaned forward slightly, wanting to feel closer to the performance. The sound of the piano filled every corner of the lobby, wrapping the audience in warmth and emotion. Even those who had been skeptical at first were now completely captivated, unable to look away or think about anything else. The old man had created a moment of connection that transcended words. As the melody reached a particularly emotional passage, some guests felt tears forming in their eyes. The combination of beauty, skill, and the life experience behind each note created a powerful impact. People felt emotions they hadn't expected: nostalgia, hope, joy, and a gentle sadness. It was a reminder of the human experience, expressed through the universal language of music. The old man's performance was no longer just entertainment. It was a reflection of life itself. The old man paused briefly, letting a single note linger in the air. The silence that followed was profound, almost as if the room itself was listening. Guests held their breath, waiting for the next sound, aware that each note carried weight and significance. When he continued, the melody took a new direction, introducing subtle harmonies and intricate patterns that showcased his incredible skill. The audience was fully engaged, following every movement and sound with rapt attention. Even the children were completely absorbed, some tilting their heads, others closing their eyes, feeling the music in a way that transcended understanding. Their innocence made them especially receptive to the emotion in the notes. The adults, too, felt the depth of the performance, realizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The old man's music had the power to touch hearts, to move people beyond words, and to create a shared sense of wonder and appreciation. As the performance continued, the audience began to feel a growing sense of connection to the old man. He was not just a performer. He was a storyteller, using the piano to communicate experiences, emotions, and memories. Each note was deliberate, each pause intentional, and each chord carried meaning. The audience could sense the depth of his life, the challenges he had overcome, and the joy he had found in music. It was a rare opportunity to witness not just talent, but the human spirit expressed through art. The old man's melody shifted again, moving into a section that was both lively and intricate. The rhythm and tempo changed smoothly, demonstrating his mastery over the piano. Guests could see how his hands moved with precision, creating a sound that was full of life and energy. The music was not just heard, it was experienced. People felt the joy, the excitement, and the subtle nuances of emotion that the old man conveyed with every note. The audience was completely enthralled, unable to look away or interrupt the flow of the performance. By the time the first half of the performance came to a close, the lobby was filled with a sense of awe and admiration. Guests were silent, processing what they had just witnessed. The old man had turned a normal evening into something unforgettable. He had shown them that talent and passion could come from anyone, regardless of appearance or age. The audience now understood that they had been lucky to witness a rare moment of human expression, a moment that would remain in their memories forever. The music continued, flowing effortlessly from the old man's fingers. Each note seemed to tell a story, carrying emotions that words could never fully capture. People in the hotel lobby leaned forward in their seats, mesmerized. Some closed their eyes to feel the depth of the melody, while others watched his hands move across the keys with wonder. It was not just the skill of his playing that captivated them, but the emotion behind each note. He wasn't performing for applause or recognition. He was sharing a part of his life with anyone willing to listen. As the melody developed, it became more complex, full of subtle nuances and layers. The audience could sense the effort and dedication it had taken to reach this level of mastery. Each hand moved independently, yet perfectly in sync, creating a sound that was rich and dynamic. The old man's back remained straight, his posture impeccable, yet his movements were fluid and natural. He seemed completely absorbed in the music, as if the piano and he were one entity. The audience felt the sincerity of his performance, the authenticity of his expression. Some of the guests began to imagine the story behind the old man's life. Perhaps he had faced challenges that had tested his spirit, times of hardship that only strengthened his love for music. Perhaps he had played in small, quiet rooms and grand concert halls alike, always letting the music guide him. The way he played suggested a lifetime of dedication, each note a reflection of experience, practice, and passion. The audience was not just listening, they were feeling a life lived through music. The old man's eyes were calm yet focused, and his expression conveyed a quiet determination. He didn't glance at the audience, nor did he seek their approval. His concentration was on the piano, and the notes themselves seemed to flow from him naturally, without effort. The rhythm changed subtly, moving from soft, reflective passages to stronger, more assertive moments. It was as if he was telling a story, inviting the audience to follow along and understand without needing words. Each chord, each pause, carried emotion, and the guests were deeply moved. A few children in the audience were completely captivated. They didn't understand every aspect of the music, but they felt it. Their eyes were wide, and their faces reflected a mixture of wonder and curiosity. The music spoke to them in a way that was simple yet profound, leaving an impression that would stay with them long after the performance ended. Adults noticed this, realizing that the old man's music had a universal quality, capable of touching hearts of all ages. The lobby itself seemed to change as he played. The warm light from the chandelier reflected off the polished marble floor, creating soft patterns that seemed to dance along with the music. The grand piano, once a mere piece of furniture, now felt alive, responding to the old man's touch. Each key produced not just a sound, but a story, and the audience could sense the depth behind it. The atmosphere was transformed, filled with a sense of reverence and awe. As the performance progressed, subtle details in his playing became more noticeable. The way his fingers curved, the way his hands anticipated each note, and the small shifts in tempo all revealed a depth of mastery that only comes from years of dedication. Each pause was intentional, each note placed with care. The audience began to realize that they were witnessing not just skill, but artistry. The music was alive, and it was telling a story that resonated deeply with everyone present. The melody moved into a section that was both lively and intricate. The rhythm picked up, and the audience felt a surge of energy. Some tapped their feet gently, others swayed in their seats, and the children leaned forward, completely absorbed. The music had the power to move people physically and emotionally, creating a shared sense of experience. It was impossible not to feel connected to the performance, as if the old man's music had reached directly into each person's heart. As he played, some guests whispered among themselves, sharing their amazement. "He's incredible," one said softly. "I never imagined someone like him could play like that." Another nodded in agreement, eyes wide with awe. Even the hotel staff, who had seen many performances, were deeply impressed. The old man had turned a simple evening in the lobby into a moment of extraordinary beauty. His talent was undeniable, but it was the emotion and authenticity in his music that left the deepest impression. The old man's hands moved effortlessly across the keys, producing a sound that was at once powerful and delicate. The melody shifted between soft, reflective passages and bold, assertive moments. Each transition was seamless, demonstrating his control and understanding of the instrument. The audience could feel the journey of the music, following the ebb and flow of emotion. It was as if he was guiding them through a story that unfolded in real time, and everyone in the room was a part of it. Some guests began to imagine the countless hours of practice and dedication that must have led to this moment. They thought about the patience, discipline, and love for music that had shaped this old man into the performer he had become. Each note reflected years of experience, a lifetime of commitment, and a deep understanding of the piano. The audience felt privileged to witness such mastery, aware that these moments were rare and precious. The music grew more emotional, carrying a sense of nostalgia and reflection. Guests felt memories stir within them, emotions they hadn't experienced in years resurfacing. Some felt a quiet sadness, others a gentle joy, and many felt both at the same time. The old man's performance had the power to touch hearts, to evoke feelings that were deeply personal and yet universally understood. The piano became a bridge between his life and the audience, a connection formed through the shared experience of music. The old man paused briefly, letting a single note linger in the air. The silence that followed was profound, as if the entire room was holding its breath. The guests leaned forward slightly, eager for the next note, aware that each sound carried meaning and emotion. When he resumed, the melody took on a new character, introducing harmonies and intricate patterns that showcased his incredible skill. The audience was captivated, completely absorbed in the music. Even the children remained focused, some tilting their heads, others closing their eyes, feeling the music in their own way. The adults, too, were deeply moved, recognizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The old man's music had the power to touch hearts, to inspire, and to create a shared sense of wonder. It reminded everyone in the lobby of the beauty and depth of human expression. The melody continued to evolve, moving through different emotions and rhythms. The audience could feel the journey, from calm reflection to energetic joy. The transitions were subtle but powerful, highlighting the old man's mastery of both technique and emotion. Guests were fully engaged, unable to look away or think about anything else. The performance had become a shared human experience, connecting everyone in the room through the power of music. By the time the first half of the performance reached its conclusion, the audience was silent, taking in the full impact of what they had just witnessed. The old man had transformed the hotel lobby into a place of beauty, emotion, and connection. Guests who had doubted him earlier felt a deep sense of respect and admiration. They had underestimated him, and now they realized the depth of his talent and the power of his music. The old man sat for a moment, hands resting lightly on the keys, allowing the audience to absorb the performance. The silence was filled with appreciation and awe. People whispered quietly among themselves, sharing their thoughts and feelings. The children looked at each other with wide eyes, silently acknowledging the wonder they had experienced. The adults exchanged nods, a shared understanding passing between them. Everyone present knew that they had witnessed something rare, a moment that would stay with them for a lifetime. As the old man prepared to continue, there was a sense of anticipation in the room. The audience leaned forward slightly, eager for the next chapter in the musical story he was telling. The piano, the old man, and the audience were all connected in a shared experience, each note weaving a tapestry of emotion and meaning. It was a reminder of the beauty of music, the power of human expression, and the ability of art to bring people together. The performance was far from over, and the audience knew that they were about to be taken on an even deeper journey through the life and soul of the old man at the piano. The old man's fingers began to move again, lighter now, as if painting the air with sound. The notes flowed gracefully, each one carefully placed, forming a melody that wrapped around everyone in the lobby. People leaned closer in their seats, unable to resist the pull of the music. Even those who had been standing at the back now edged forward, drawn by a curiosity that had long turned into admiration. There was a magic in the way he played, a feeling that transcended the ordinary and invited every listener to join him on a journey. The piano's sound filled the room, bouncing off the walls and ceilings, mingling with the warm light from the chandelier. The audience felt as though they were part of something special, something rare. The old man's performance had transformed a normal hotel evening into an unforgettable experience. The laughter and casual chatter from earlier had vanished completely, replaced by complete attention and wonder. Everyone felt connected to the music, to each other, and to the life story that the old man seemed to be sharing through each note. As he played, small movements and expressions revealed the depth of his mastery. His hands moved independently, sometimes soft and tender, sometimes bold and assertive. The melody shifted smoothly, carrying a range of emotions that felt personal to each listener. Guests could sense the stories behind each phrase, the life lived through decades of dedication. The old man's music spoke without words, touching hearts in ways that few things could. People realized that this was not just a performance. It was an experience that connected them to a human life rich with emotion and meaning. Some of the audience began to imagine the old man's life beyond the piano. Perhaps he had once performed on grand stages, facing thousands of eyes and ears, or in small, quiet rooms where the music spoke directly to a handful of listeners. Perhaps he had faced hardships and challenges, but music had been a constant companion, a source of joy, comfort, and purpose. These thoughts deepened the impact of his performance, making each note carry even more weight. The audience was witnessing not just skill, but the expression of a lifetime through music. The old man's eyes were calm, focused, and full of a quiet intensity. He did not seek attention, nor did he acknowledge the audience with gestures or words. His concentration was solely on the piano, and each note seemed to flow naturally from his heart. The melody rose and fell, sometimes gentle and reflective, other times strong and commanding. The guests felt themselves carried along with the music, experiencing the full range of emotion that he was expressing. It was impossible to remain indifferent or distracted. Every person in the room was fully engaged. A few children, who had been watching quietly, were completely absorbed. Their wide eyes and soft smiles revealed their amazement. They did not need to understand the complexities of the music. They felt its beauty and emotion deeply. Adults, too, were touched, recognizing that they were witnessing a rare and extraordinary talent. The old man's performance reminded everyone that music had the power to connect, to move, and to inspire across all ages. It transcended experience, knowledge, and expectation. The atmosphere in the lobby was filled with warmth and reverence. The light from the chandelier cast soft reflections across the polished floor, and the piano seemed alive under the old man's touch. Each key he pressed carried a voice, a story, and a feeling. Guests felt the music in their bones, hearts, and minds. They were fully present in the moment, absorbed by the beauty and depth of the performance. It was not just the sound, but the emotion behind it that made the evening unforgettable. The old man's playing grew even more dynamic, blending soft, tender passages with powerful, commanding notes. Each transition was seamless, demonstrating not only technical skill but also a deep understanding of emotional storytelling. The audience could feel the ebb and flow of the melody, sensing both the calm and the intensity of the music. Some tapped their feet gently, some swayed with the rhythm, and some simply closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them completely. The performance had created a shared experience, binding everyone in the lobby through the universal language of sound. As he continued, the audience became more aware of the subtleties in his technique. The slight shifts in tempo, the nuanced changes in volume, and the delicate pauses between notes all contributed to a rich, layered performance. Every gesture, every touch of the key, was deliberate. It was evident that the old man had spent a lifetime perfecting his art, dedicating countless hours to practice, discipline, and emotional expression. The audience felt privileged to witness such mastery, a rare gift shared in the most humble and human way. The melody transitioned into a section that was lively and intricate. The rhythm picked up, and energy flowed through the room. The guests felt the music physically, their bodies responding subtly to the rhythm and movement. Children leaned forward, wide-eyed, and adults felt a rush of excitement and joy. The old man's music was alive, vibrant, and engaging. It created a space where everyone could feel connected not only to the performance but also to each other, sharing in a moment of pure human connection. Whispers of admiration began to circulate quietly among the audience. "He's amazing," one person said softly. "I never imagined someone could play like this," said another. The hotel staff, too, were captivated, standing silently, watching and listening with deep respect. The old man's performance had turned a simple evening into a memory that would stay with everyone forever. The audience now understood that the initial laughter had been misplaced, that they had underestimated him, and that they were now witnessing something extraordinary. The old man's hands continued to move gracefully across the keys, producing a sound that was both delicate and powerful. The music shifted seamlessly between reflective, tender moments and bold, passionate passages. Guests could feel the story unfolding, from quiet introspection to energetic celebration. It was as if the old man was guiding them on a journey through his experiences, emotions, and memories. Every note carried meaning, and the audience could feel the depth of life expressed through his playing. As the performance progressed, some guests thought about the dedication required to reach this level of mastery. They considered the years of practice, the discipline, and the love for music that had shaped this old man. Every note reflected a lifetime of commitment, an understanding of the piano that came only from experience and passion. The audience felt grateful to witness such authenticity and depth. The music was more than entertainment. It was a window into a life lived fully, expressed through the universal language of art. The melody became more emotional, filled with nostalgia and reflection. Guests felt memories and emotions stir within them, evoking a sense of connection to the performance. Some experienced quiet sadness, others a gentle joy, and many felt a mixture of both. The old man's music had the power to touch hearts, to evoke feelings that were deeply personal, yet shared collectively among everyone in the room. The piano became a bridge, connecting his life to the audience, creating a shared human experience. A brief pause followed, leaving a single note lingering in the air. The silence was profound, filled with anticipation. The audience leaned forward slightly, eager to hear the next note, aware that every sound carried weight and meaning. When he resumed, the melody took on new complexity, introducing subtle harmonies and intricate patterns. The audience remained captivated, hanging on every movement of his hands and every sound produced. The old man's skill and emotion were undeniable, and the impact on the audience was profound. Even the children remained fully attentive, some tilting their heads, others closing their eyes to experience the music more deeply. Adults, too, were moved, recognizing the rarity of what they were witnessing. The old man's performance reminded everyone of the power of art, the ability of music to connect and inspire, and the beauty of human expression. His playing had created a shared moment of wonder, awe, and emotional connection that would stay with them forever. The music grew more dynamic, moving through different tempos and emotions. The audience followed the journey, experiencing the calm and the excitement of the melody. The transitions were smooth, showcasing the old man's mastery of both technique and storytelling. Guests were fully engaged, completely present in the moment, and unable to be distracted by anything else. The performance had become a shared experience, connecting everyone through the universal power of music. By the time this portion of the performance reached its peak, the audience was in awe. The old man had transformed a simple hotel evening into a moment of beauty, emotion, and connection. Guests who had doubted him earlier felt admiration and respect. They realized that they had underestimated him, and now they understood the depth of his talent and the power of his music. The old man's performance was a testament to the human spirit, the dedication of a lifetime, and the universal language of art that can touch hearts and inspire minds. The old man rested his hands lightly on the keys, allowing the audience to absorb the beauty of what they had just heard. The silence was filled with appreciation and awe. Guests whispered quietly to one another, sharing their thoughts and feelings. The children exchanged wide-eyed looks, silently acknowledging the wonder they had experienced. Adults nodded, understanding that they had witnessed a rare and unforgettable moment. As the old man prepared to continue, the audience leaned in, eager to follow him on the next stage of the journey through his music. The piano, the old man, and the audience were united in a shared human experience, each note creating a bond that would remain in their memories forever. The old man's performance reached its final stage, a culmination of emotion, skill, and experience that had captured the hearts of everyone in the hotel lobby. Each note was deliberate, flowing naturally, forming a melody that was both powerful and gentle. The audience sat in rapt attention, fully immersed in the music. The initial laughter and disbelief had long disappeared, replaced by admiration, respect, and awe. People realized that they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. The melody shifted once again, moving through gentle passages that carried a sense of reflection and quiet beauty. The old man's fingers glided effortlessly across the keys, each note perfectly placed. His hands moved independently, creating harmonies that were rich and alive. Guests felt the depth of emotion in every chord, understanding that this was more than just a performance. It was an expression of a lifetime of experiences, a sharing of the soul through music. Some guests imagined the old man's journey to this moment. Perhaps he had faced years of struggle, times of doubt and hardship, yet he had continued to play and perfect his craft. Perhaps music had been his constant companion, offering comfort, joy, and purpose through life's ups and downs. Each note seemed to tell a story, revealing not only his skill but also his resilience, his dedication, and his passion. The audience could feel the weight of his experiences woven into the music. The old man's expression was calm and focused, his eyes reflecting concentration and serenity. He didn't seek attention or applause. His performance was an offering, a way to communicate without words. The melody rose and fell like the tide, gentle at times, commanding at others. The audience felt themselves drawn along by the music, following the emotional journey the old man was leading them through. It was impossible to remain indifferent. The power of the music had everyone captivated. Children in the audience remained mesmerized, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes to fully experience the emotion. They felt the music without needing to understand its complexity. Adults, too, were moved, recognizing the rare gift before them. The old man's performance demonstrated that true artistry could touch anyone, regardless of age or experience. The music was universal, connecting hearts and minds in a way that words never could. The lobby was quiet except for the sound of the piano, which seemed to fill every corner. The warm light from the chandelier reflected off the polished marble, creating a soft glow that added to the atmosphere of wonder. The piano, under the old man's hands, came alive, each key speaking with its own voice. Guests felt a shared connection through the music, a sense that they were all experiencing something precious and unforgettable. The ordinary hotel lobby had been transformed into a space of beauty and emotion. As the old man continued, subtle details of his mastery became more apparent. The slight shifts in tempo, the delicate changes in volume, and the careful pauses between notes all contributed to a performance that was both intricate and emotional. Each gesture was intentional, demonstrating years of practice and dedication. The audience was aware that they were witnessing not only skill but a form of storytelling that conveyed emotion, history, and humanity. The melody grew more dynamic, blending soft, reflective passages with moments of strength and power. Guests felt the music in their bodies and hearts, responding to the rhythm and emotion. Some tapped their feet, others swayed gently, and many simply listened, absorbed in the beauty of the performance. The old man's music had created a shared experience, uniting the audience in awe and admiration. Whispers of amazement circulated quietly among the guests. "He's remarkable," one said softly. "I've never heard anything like this," another whispered. Even the hotel staff were captivated, standing silently, watching and listening with respect. The old man's performance had turned a normal evening into a memorable experience, something that would be remembered for years. The audience understood that they had underestimated him initially, and now they recognized the depth of his talent and the power of his music. The old man's hands continued their graceful movement, producing sounds that were both delicate and commanding. The melody shifted smoothly, conveying a range of emotions that resonated with each listener personally. Guests felt themselves carried along by the music, experiencing moments of reflection, joy, nostalgia, and hope. It was as though the old man was guiding them through a journey of life itself, expressing the full spectrum of human emotion through the piano. Some guests considered the dedication and practice required to achieve such mastery. They thought about the years of learning, the patience, and the love for music that had shaped this old man. Every note reflected a lifetime of experience and understanding. The audience felt privileged to witness such an authentic and powerful performance. It was more than music. It was a testament to the human spirit, to perseverance, and to the beauty of expression. The melody became increasingly emotional, touching on themes of reflection and celebration. Guests felt memories stir within them, emotions long forgotten resurfacing as the music resonated deeply. Some felt quiet tears, others a gentle sense of joy, and many experienced a combination of both. The old man's music had the power to reach the hearts of everyone present, transcending age, background, and expectations. The piano served as a bridge, connecting his life to the audience and creating a shared human experience. A momentary pause allowed a single note to linger in the air, filling the lobby with quiet anticipation. Guests leaned forward, eager for the next sound. When the old man resumed, the melody introduced intricate harmonies and delicate patterns that showcased his technical skill and emotional depth. The audience was fully absorbed, hanging on every movement, every sound. The old man's mastery was undeniable, but it was his ability to communicate life and emotion through music that left the deepest impression. Children, too, remained completely attentive, some tilting their heads, others closing their eyes to feel the music more fully. Adults were equally moved, recognizing the rarity of the experience. The old man's performance demonstrated the universal power of music, the ability to connect, inspire, and communicate emotions without words. The audience shared a collective sense of wonder, admiration, and emotional connection, all centered around the music and the man who played it. The final section of the performance built an intensity, combining moments of gentle reflection with passages of powerful, sweeping energy. The audience could feel the story unfolding, following the emotional arc the old man had created. Every note, every chord, every pause carried meaning, expressing the journey of a life filled with dedication, passion, and humanity. Guests were completely present, fully engaged, and deeply affected by the performance. By the end, the old man's fingers moved with quiet confidence, each note deliberate and filled with emotion. The melody softened, slowing gradually, leading the audience toward a peaceful, reflective conclusion. The lobby was silent, everyone holding their breath, savoring the final moments of the music. The performance had taken them on an emotional journey, and they were reluctant for it to end. The old man's talent had transformed an ordinary evening into an extraordinary, unforgettable experience. When the last note faded, the audience remained still for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder and more heartfelt. Guests stood, clapping and cheering, their faces full of admiration and gratitude. Children clapped with innocent joy, and adults joined in, moved by the beauty and power of what they had witnessed. Even the hotel staff showed deep respect, acknowledging the extraordinary performance they had just experienced. The old man nodded quietly, not seeking attention but acknowledging the audience's appreciation. He had shared his gift, his life, and his heart through the piano, and the room responded with admiration and awe. The audience understood that they had witnessed something rare, a moment of true artistry that would stay in their memories forever. The old man's performance had not only entertained, but had touched the hearts of everyone present, reminding them of the beauty, depth, and power of human expression. It was a perfect, unforgettable ending to an evening that began with laughter but had transformed into a celebration of talent, passion, and the magic of music.